So another day of working on the Dragonfly dress. I've been waiting for this day forever because I get to do some of the more exciting parts of building this dress. So today my plan is to finally add the boning to the boning channels and then to cover this in little Dragonfly applique pieces. And I think once I do that, then this dress will really start to come together, because right now I feel like it looks a little bit mismatched with like these nude colored bra cups poking through. Those are going to get all covered up hopefully by the applique, and once that's done then I can get started on the skirt part and it'll really start to look like a real gown. So I'm just going to jump into this head first. There will be a lot of playing around with the applique placement to see how I like it, and that's more of a fun part for me than just like doing things the technical right way, like stitching things down. So this day gets to be a little bit more creative hopefully. So let's get to it.
So doing the boning part will be really simple since I already have the boning channels done. So I'm just going to take the same boning that I use for my corsets and just going to measure what I want each boning channel length to be. I'm going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the waistline here, so I don't want to cut down to here because then the boning will go into the waistline and that's no good. And I also don't want it to rub up against this fabric too much or be too tight in this channel. So I'm going to cut it about 3/4 of an inch shorter than the actual length of the corset. So there's like my 1/2 inch seam allowance there, and then a little extra wiggle room so that this doesn't rub up against any edges. And I'm just going to do that for every single one of these channels. Next I need to trim the ends of my boning so that they're nice and curved and not pokey like this. So I'm going to use my handy dandy boning cutting tool. Which makes a nice rounded edge on my boning. The boning is ready, so now I get to slide it into the corset top. Okay, so now that the grommets are all done, I've got it laced up and on the dress form so that I can easily put the applique pieces on it. I have a bunch of these pieces already cut out, but I have a feeling I'm going to need a lot more. So I'm going to just cut a bunch of these out of this scrap fabric that I have for now, and then I do have a lot more of this fabric for the skirt portion as well, so if I need it I can always cut into that, but I think that there's a lot of dragonflies here, so I'll start with this and then see where that gets me. So if you've never made your own applique pieces before, it really is quite simple. You can just cut out these little pieces from any tulle fabric, and it's pretty much safe to cut it because it's netting, so it's not going to fray like a normal fabric would. So I'm just going to cut this little piece off, and you basically just cut around the edges of the embroidery as close as you can to the edge. When I stitch this down, I'm going to stitch it on this piece. So anything that's left hanging over the edge might be a little bit visible. So that's why it's best to get it as close as you possibly can. Unless you're looking at it up close though, a lot of these little like extra pieces of tulle aren't going to be super noticeable. Like from far away, for example, you can't even see that it's there. And that's what the finished piece looks like. And now I have to do this like 100 times to get enough pieces for the top, so that's what I'm going to be doing for the next hour probably. So one thing to consider is when you're pinning this on, you want to use enough pins to hold it in place, but once you take it off of the dress form, it's just going to be like a pin nightmare. And especially when you're wrangling this under a sewing machine, you don't want to have any pins more than necessary. So I'm just pinning enough to kind of keep it in place anywhere that looks like it might be an issue spot. And then I'm going to really just rely on my sewing machine to hold the rest down. Alright, so I think that the applique is pretty much done. I wanted to sort of just focus on covering up the bust area, and then I wanted to leave it more open in like the bodice area so that it wouldn't look so stark of a difference when I attach the skirt, which is going to be made from the same fabric. So I hope I didn't do too much. It's hard to not just go overboard, but I think this is a good starting point. And then if I decide later that I want to add more pieces, that's pretty easy to do. I think I want to try it on first though before I start adding stuff, especially to the neckline area, because I'm not really quite sure how this is all going to look, but this is at least a good starting point for me to get everything stitched down and then go from there. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch it pretty much everywhere where it's not going to interfere with the boning. I'm going to try to do that by machine very carefully. And before I do that, I kind of just want to go over everywhere that I've pinned things down, especially in this cup area, since it's kind of hard to pin things down perfectly on a dress form. I'm going to just try to smooth things out as best as I can before I take it over to the sewing machine. Well, I thought that I had the thread I needed to do the top stitching embroidery part on my sewing machine, but it's been a few years since I've done this, and it turns out that I don't have that thread anymore, or I can't find it, so I can't do what I thought I was going to do today, so I guess I'm going to stop there. But I feel like I came pretty far today. Doesn't look like much right now, but it's got the applique on. That was going to be one of the more time-consuming parts, but now I feel like it looks like more of a gown, hopefully, and the final vision's starting to come together. So I may just keep this short and sweet and stop the video here, and then I'll continue on to part 2 of putting the dragonflies on the bodice in the next video.